So hello, I'm Father Michael Winstanley. I'm a Salesian of Don Bosco and a long-standing friend of Father Francis Gustillo. I'm based in our Salesian community in Bolton, which is near Manchester in the UK. And I'm delighted to have this opportunity of sharing with you some reflections on the Gospel of Mark, the Gospel for this year, Year B. I've been to the Philippines 3 times in my life. I can't remember much about the first time, but I spent 5 months with the Salesians in Parañaque, sort of October to March 2011, 2012, which was a wonderful experience. And it was during that time that we climbed Mount Pinatubo, which was really exciting. And also I was told that I spoke Harry Potter English, which I take to mean I don't have an American accent. But anyway, if you like Harry Potter, then we're okay. And then just over a year ago, in the year last May, I spent a month in Batolao with the Salesians, giving them their annual retreat. So I'm very, very fond of the country and particularly of the people that I've met. You're always so cheerful and so friendly and also deeply spiritual. So it's a great pleasure for me to have this series of talks with you. So let's get down to work then. A few words of introduction in general. The Gospel of Mark is the shortest of the 4 canonical Christian Gospels. And most people, most scholars today believe that Mark was the first person to write a gospel. In fact, he was the one who created this literary genre. But for centuries, the view of St. Augustine was accepted, whereby Mark was thought to have copied and abbreviated the Gospel of Matthew. And Matthew was really the main gospel in the church for centuries and centuries, and Mark was very much neglected. Things changed in the 19th century when scholars came to realize that in fact it was Mark who wrote first. And he did so probably around the time of the fall of Jerusalem and the destruction of the temple there, about 70 of the Christian era. A long tradition maintains that he wrote in Rome, and I think a majority of scholars still accept that view. But others suggest a place nearer Palestine, like southern Syria. Many attempts have been made over the years to identify Mark. Who was this Mark? He's been linked by some with the John Mark you find in the Acts of the Apostles, with the Mark who's mentioned in the Pauline letters and also in the first letter of Peter, but certainty seems elusive. And the fact that Mark was probably one of the most popular names in the Roman Empire at the time doesn't help, does it? For his task, Mark used oral traditions about Jesus which were circulating in the early Christian communities, and probably some written traditions too. And this material, coming from different sources, he arranged in the form of a narrative. So the storyline, after the initial Jordan baptism at the beginning until the Calvary scene at the end, depends not on a historical chronological sequence of Jesus's actual ministry, but on Mark's own creative design. He's the one who put it together like that. I always believe that it's useful to view any of the Gospels and Gospel passages from 3 complementary perspectives: literary, historical, theological. The Gospels are pieces of literature written by competent writers for a particular clientele, using the literary techniques of the time. They are the word of God in human language. And each of the evangelists, excuse me, each has his own individual style and characteristic traits. And lots of literary techniques are employed, like irony and symbolism and parallelism and inclusion and so on. There's a plot, there's character portrayal, there's conflict development, and the careful use of movement and of time and space settings. And the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, as we are wont to call it, is constantly in the background, implicitly and sometimes explicitly. The Gospels are also historical documents, but not in the sense that every detail is factually accurate. Jesus lived in a particular geographical and social, religious, economic, historical setting in a predominantly Jewish culture, which was also influenced by the wider Greco-Roman culture of the Mediterranean basin. And the rich diversity of this backcloth is reflected in the gospel stories. Many historical issues emerge in the narrative and require consideration. And such considerations may cause us to rethink previously held views. But I think this serves to enhance and to enrich our faith. But the main purpose of the evangelist is what I'd call theological. As a person of deep faith, each of the evangelists seeks to share that faith vision and conviction with others, with his readers, with his hearers. They are really preachers and catechists. The work has been described as a sermon or sermons in story form. They set out to tell us about God, about God's offer of salvation and new life, about Jesus, his life, his ministry, his death and resurrection, about the world we live in, about sin and death, and about our lives as disciples. And each of them have their own theological emphases, perspectives. They tell the story of Jesus in order to elicit from those listening or reading a response of faith, ongoing conversion, love, and commitment. And so I believe the key question I need to ask when confronted by a gospel extract is, what's the theological message, the word from God that this evangelist is trying to communicate to me here? What aspects of the faith of the early Christian community is the author articulating, proclaiming? And then moving on, I seek to discern what that gospel message is for me, for us today, in our very different world and our evolving culture, with its new problems and its fresh challenges. In these talks, I propose to examine Mark's Gospel from a literary perspective and consider the four main characters in the story: Jesus, the 12 disciples, the little people or minor characters, and what I'd call the opposition. And then to conclude, I'll discuss the death and resurrection of Jesus. And throughout that process, I'll seek to highlight the theological message.